You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
Hello and welcome to episode 82 of Making Tracks, brought to you by the fine folk over at fanfortracks.com. My name's Mark, I am one of your co-hosts, and today, as always, I am joined by the man with a plan, and by the plan I mean this week's running order, Mr. Mark Newbold. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I'm very good, but I've got to say I did get the running order wrong. We're actually going to now go into the outro.
Okay.
And then work our way jumbled from there. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm very well. How are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks, buddy. How'd your week in Star Wars been?
It's been a busy one. I mean, loads to talk about this episode. Good things that have happened, but mostly things that we bought. Yeah, it's been a good week. Lots going on, and life is just sort of bobbling along. It's still Groundhog Day.
Yeah, it still is. But hey, that's fair. And, you know, I think I've said to you before that my girlfriend kind of considers yourself to be kind of like my my main enablers, because this week I did pick up, and it's Fan for Track's fault, I did pick up one of those Hasbro remote control Dios, which are selling for like a song on Amazon.
That is the deal of the century. Normally it's what, 115 quid or something crazy like that for the, like I say, the remote control Dio, the Hasbro Dio, and they did a deal for, what was it, £25?
25 quid, and because I got Prime, I got obviously free shipping, and it arrived the next day. Yeah, I mean, I can't say I've actually cracked him out of the box or anything yet, but he looks cool, and I think actually I forgot, I have actually seen him and I've played around with him at a convention, and he is really cool because he kind of plays fetch with the ball, and he follows the little kind of controller ball you've got, and yeah, it doesn't work quite so well on carpets, I'm told. But if you've got like a laminate floor like we have throughout most of the house, you're pretty much sorted. I just don't know if I can actually bear it to crack it open, to be honest, because it's quite a cool box.
This is the box. I've opened him up. I got him out and I charged him up. I haven't downloaded the app yet because it's app enabled. And I haven't done that yet, but he's charged up. It's very clever. The top and bottom of the box is plastic. So when you take the top and the bottom off, it basically pops together to make the stand that he sits on, the little grey stand that he sits on. So it's really clever. Beautifully put together. I've put the batteries in, so he's ready to go. Just need to download the app and give him a run. So hopefully by next week, I'll be able to tell you how efficient he is. I'm pleased to have him on the shelf.
I might have to try and find some shelf space for him then and crack him out. I mean, I got the BB-8 Sphero. I didn't get, and I am still kicking myself about not getting the Sphero R2 because that was the one that I really liked. But the one thing I did with BB-8 was you could watch Force Awakens and he would kind of interact with what was going on the screen. So that was probably the longest amount of time I actually spent playing with BB-8. What shall we start with? Shall we start with some like very happy streaming news?
Happy streaming news that's not related to me blowing my nose. Yes, let's start with that, Mark. Let's start with that.
For those who haven't seen it on the website, by website I mean Fan for Tracks, mark the 2nd of April in your calendars, as it will be a day long remembered because Disney Plus is finally adding some classic Star Wars TV shows to the streaming service. Both the original live-action made-for-TV movies, The Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure, and the sequel, The Battle of Endor, is dropping, as well as both seasons of the animated Ewoks cartoon and the Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars micro-series, but also, I think quite surprisingly, because it's only available on a Blu-ray bonus disc, is the animation from the Star Wars Holiday Special, which is entitled The Story of the Faithful Wookiee, but we basically all know it as the Boba Fett animated cartoon.
Early days with Star Wars, and I think it kind of goes back to when Detours was made and then they didn't release it after the purchase because they didn't want to muddy the waters. This gives me confidence that at some juncture Detours will just crop up on Disney Plus. Why wouldn't it? And I think people will dig it. And people know what Disney's era of Star Wars is about now because they're expanding the world through the TV, and obviously we've had 5 movies. To get these on as a historical look at mid-80s Star Wars, with Caravan of Courage in 84, Battle for Endor in 85, Ewoks and Droids was 2 seasons around the same time. Obviously, Tartakovsky Clone Wars was 2003, so you're into the prequel trilogy era. And then stepping back to the holiday special, I mean, that's the one that really surprised me. The others didn't blow me away and surprised that they were coming out because it felt like they needed to. And I'm still curious if and when, but hopefully when Droids finally gets resolved and they can get that on there. But the holiday special and that animated sequence, anything to do with the holiday special coming onto the official streaming platform of Star Wars, Disney Plus, I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, it's big news, really, when you think about it. Like you said, I mean, because nobody really wants to put any level of ownership to this holiday special, really, I think, from Lucasfilm. It's kind of one of those things that happened and, you know, they could take it all back. They probably would, or maybe even redo it in a slightly different way with greater kind of like oversight. It might have turned out something a little bit different. I'm really excited because I think I said this before. The Ewoks cartoons and the Droids cartoons were definitely my first real memories of being introduced to Star Wars. I watched those on BBC TV after school in the mid-80s, even before I really think I saw any of the Star Wars films. So for me, Ewok, it's kind of got a very special, unique place in my heart, which I'm sure a lot of people will kind of be like, what are you doing, Mulcaster? Caravan Courage and Battle of Endor, they are kind of like a snapshot in time based on everything. They were small, micro-budget productions, really, I think. I don't think they had a huge amount of money behind them, but they've also, you know, they worked in a fairly creative way to kind of get the most out of it. And also we've got blurgs in it, which happen to then be seen again in Mandalorian. So it's synergy now, isn't it? And I suppose in some respects, by possibly even having the blurgs in the Mandalorian, it kind of maybe adds a little bit of legitimacy to it, because I think if we had asked Disney Plus and Disney back when the streaming service was first announced and released, they probably would say they have no plans. So it's great that they're now getting round to it finally. So hopefully they will release a Droids TV series as well.
If you look at each of the releases, Caravan of Courage, Battle for Endor, obviously Jedi 40th is coming up, but you just mentioned Blurgs, which makes all the sense. Holiday Special, Mando's Amban phase rifle, which is what Fett uses in the animated section of that. Tartakovsky Clone Wars, they've just announced in War of the Bounty Hunters that Dirge is coming back, so he first appeared in this. So there's lots of links between what's happening now and what we're getting here. Totally with you for Droids. The summer of 84 for me was Star Trek 3, Search for Spock, Temple of Doom, and Caravan of Courage. They were the three films I'd go back to the cinema and keep seeing. When I was a member of Bantha Tracks, you got a poster, Caravan of Courage poster, the Drew Struzan poster there, and a little badge with the picture of Wicket on it. So that was obviously very present in our thoughts in 84, but as we moved past the trilogy, because we didn't know what was coming. The Ewoks animated show, I wasn't so much into Ewoks, I was really into Droids. I was at that point where I was sort of videoing it and then watching it back and writing down all the names of the characters and names of the ships. I had a little, little database of stuff from the droids and such. So it was great fun. So I really hope, like you say, I really hope Droids comes, but absolutely stoked for what we've got here.
Funny you should mention about writing that, because I basically did exactly the same for Ewoks. So the only kind of bit of, I suppose you say fan fiction, but not really. It was kind of like a reference was I wrote like the guide to the Ewoks, which is a kind of like a 19-page kind of document, and it was basically like an encyclopedia for the Ewoks. You know, we are kind of very similar, actually. It's quite funny. I don't think I kept it, which is a shame, because I bet there's a ton of spelling mistakes and grammatical errors, which is no surprise if anybody's read any of my articles.
How did you spell Kanisa? I mean, come on.
Exactly. Well, to be fair, actually, I think I've said this... at least it's definitely no kind of like surprise to my girlfriend about, but I think I said to one of my first crushes was probably Latara, who was the Ewok, who was constantly chasing Wickets. You know, I mean, again, make of that what you will.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
First things first, handshake.
Hey, lovely. How you doing?
Star Wars is Star Wars. It's bigger than pretty much anything. You must have had some moments on set when you stood back and went, wow. Was there a moment you can put your finger on that you just really took a breath and thought, this is pretty cool?
You know, it was my first day on set, I think. I turned up, hundreds of stormtroopers running around. It kind of makes you feel like a big kid. And I think that feeling is one that never really got old. Every day on set was something that was surprising and something that I savoured, and as this is all coming to an end, it's almost a bit sad.
So awards season carries on and nominations keep coming our way, and another one has landed for Riz Ahmed, Bodhi Rook in Rogue One. He's been nominated for The Sound of Metal. So in that film he plays the role of Ruben, a heavy metal drummer who, because of obviously all the noise and crashing and bashing that's going around, loses his hearing and his battle with that. Consequently though, because he's been nominated, he is officially the first Muslim actor to be nominated for a Best Actor award. So fantastic news for Riz. Fingers crossed when the awards come. We've had John Boyega take home the Golden Globe for Small Acts, Red, White and Blue, so that was fantastic news. Congratulations, Riz, and fingers crossed when the awards happen later in April.
I'm Neil deGrasse Tyson, and you are following Fanthatrax.
Hasbro revealed more Black Series figures to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Lucasfilm, with a wave of 4 Black Series figures announced to commemorate the early Lucasfilm publishing program. The 4 figures were quite well received, albeit there's a little bit of a mix-up when it came to some of the naming, which we'll chat about in a minute. The wave is Jackson, Luke Skywalker from Heir to the Empire, Darth Maul, Kia Kanos, or Kana Jax, depending on which way you look at the merchandising. Mark, did you get a chance to have a look at these? And more importantly, have you had a chance to pre-order these?
Oh, dude, I will give a name shout and a name check straight away to my former co-host Dave Tree. His shop, all the cool stuff in Fordham Bridge. Ordered all 4. So, yeah, if you want to get your figures, go over there. It's all on the site. They look fantastic. I mean, as you say, Maul, Sith Apprentice with that beautiful artwork. I think that was a Dark Horse era comic, if I remember correctly.
That's correct,
so that looks fantastic. Jackson, as you've just mentioned, they've gone for the Star Wars Adventures, the annual, with Lando, which, and I did put this in the article when I posted it on the site, the very first time Cavan Scott publicly mentioned that Jackson was coming into continuity was live on stage at Celebration Chicago when he was our guest on the stage. And then Luke from, I mean, obviously Heir to the Empire is a novel, but the Dark Horse adaptation, they've took that version of Luke and also added the Salamiri as well, which was a good touch.
Fun. Yeah, nice.
Nice little touch. So they all look fantastic, fantastic packaging. And apologies to Hasbro, because we've got friends there, but frankly, this is a bit of a cock-up. They've posted it and created it as Kana Jax, but as Matt Booker straight away, if anyone knows Matt, his on-screen name since the 90s has been Kana Jax. And straight away he went, that's not Kana Jax, that's Kia Kanos. And you look, and Kana is much more black in his outfit, and it's on the covers of Crimson Empire 1 and 2. There's plenty of Kia Kanos, Kana Jax stuff out there. They've made a mistake. So obviously, I think people are going to point the finger at Hasbro, but it has to be said, everything has to go through Lucasfilm, everything has to go through Disney, up and down the chain. It's not been missed by one person. This has been missed by many. So this really is quite a bad mistake.
Yeah, it's a bit of a you could almost say it's kind of as bad as like for LLM and Zuckers, really, when you think about it. But then you think, well, that was almost 40 years ago and it was a different time. But how things are these days, like you said, everything gets approved. I mean, there's a big chunk of like text, which I'm guessing will be some kind of biography for the character, or at least the character in situ for the book.
Yeah.
So the question is, does that all need to be rewritten, or what are we going to do? I mean, because clearly the figure is more important, and it's probably a lot easier just to change 10 characters on packaging than it will be to remold and resculpt the figure. Yeah. What would you prefer? Would you prefer Kana Jax, or would you prefer Kia Kanos if you had the choice?
Well, I'd like both if I want to be selfish about it. And I really hope, and you mentioned the fall on for LOM, whatever, and Zuckers. That was an understandable mistake, because as kids we grew up with knowing that Zuckers was the grey one and Fall On was the beige one, and then I don't know why they didn't leave it as it was, but anyway, that was their decision and they made it, and they did a nice twin pack of that. You just said it. Do you go by the artwork or do you go by the figure? Because if you go by the artwork, it's Kana Jax artwork. They've got it back to front, so I think there's the potential to either just maybe, I don't know how far down the chain they are with producing these figures, physically in hand producing these figures, whether they're out there and it's done. If that's the case, that's awkward. Or do they, maybe not recall. That's probably not a route that Hasbro wants to go down at the moment with the whole Corrigium situation, which is another conversation entirely. So, I mean, they've already put a statement out saying, yes, we understand, we know if there's been an error, and they've addressed it, if you like.
And anybody, I guess, who's kind of a collector of that news fairly straight away that there was an issue, you would expect all that stuff, either the imagery and materials would have been supplied by Lucasfilm, begin with, and maybe somewhere in the production process, the names have got confused and nobody's picked up on it at Hasbro, which, it's understandable. They have a lot of figures to kind of produce and a lot of different franchises and stuff. So there's a lot of characters I guess they need to kind of keep down pat.
But you think, just to say, Mark, you think if this passed the desk of somebody like Pablo Hidalgo, pick a name, or Leland Shee, or somebody like that, they would have gone like fandom did within 30 seconds.
You would expect them to. Yes, exactly. You would expect them to. So, yeah, if it's too late, well, then I guess what they do is they do the initial run, then they do an error fix, and the later ones get fixed, and we end up having to buy 2 figures, which is basically what will happen. So actually, if they start recalling it, there's going to be people who will not be sending that stock back if it's got to that point, because they know, well, actually, if we hang on to this, I'll be able to sell these for like 10 times the price than I did before the the recall. It will be a collector's oddity more than anything.
They can change the writing on the inside of the packaging to Keir Kanos and then release a Carnage Axe, because goodness knows there's plenty of other Crimson Empire comics that they could put the right way around. So fingers crossed they do that. Maybe a Celebration exclusive or something. We'll get the other guy.
Yeah, that's true. There you go. They've got their convention exclusive lined up. So what do you make of the Jackson figure? Because myself, I think it's great that they're actually doing a figure, but I'm not necessarily too oversold on the kind of the sculpt.
It's a weird one. We talked last week, Bowman's Green releasing those beautiful prints, the 8 for Baduba 3 prints, and that's the first time we saw Jackson. So, and they're selling great. Kevin Scott's got one. People are digging it. They're selling a lot around the place. So congratulations to the team at Bowman's Green. Fantastic. And couldn't be better timed given that this has come out. So you look at that version of Jackson, which a lot of people are familiar with, and those early characters kind of get scoffed at a little bit, and did, especially through the 90s, especially. Now there's a lot of love for that era. And I think IDW, Cavan again, have done a wonderful job of reintroducing Jackson into continuity and bringing that character back to the point where you kind of look at Jackson and Jar Jar and sort of a similar tone. It's slightly goofy, a little bit quirky, but hey, it's Star Wars and everything fits. So I look at the version that's there on the packaging, beautiful cover, by the way, and that's kind of how I see him in my head. A sculpt of him in that style would have worked for me a little bit better than this sort of more Doug Wheatley, Dark Horse style Jackson. That's the sort of style I'm thinking in my head. You've got the original Marvel Jackson, the IDW Jackson. It did seem like a slightly odd version of Jackson to go for. Looks fantastic, don't get me wrong, it looks great. And it is more sort of realistic, inverted commas, as much as anything Star Wars can be realistic. So I'm pleased with it. But, you look at the animated version on the box, on the site, we've got the pictures of the front cover of the box and the open box. You look at Jackson on the artwork of Jackson from IDW, and then you look at the figure. It's obviously the same character, but yeah, it doesn't quite stack up, but I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
It does look nice. I've ordered it. I'm getting it, so...
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, he'll always be Bucky O'Hare to me. 4 figures, they're all out. Take you back about £100 if you're going to buy them all, but I say it's definitely worth it, and especially for those who are going to be collecting all the 50th anniversary Lucasfilm figures, it's a nice little set.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So, Mark, get ready, because we've got another listener's question.
Really? Cool.
Christmas is coming. It's a very cool one. It's a very brief one, but I think it will give us plenty to chew on and talk about. I will read it out from top to bottom. Hi, Fantha. Quick question for you both. Over the years, I've noticed that some people refer to the original bounty hunter as Boba Fett, even though he is clearly called Boba Fett, as heard in the movies and the Mando TV series. What gives? And that's from Lee H. So, Mark, what do you think? Because, like Lee says, there's Boba Fett and Boba Fett, and there's Leia and Leia, and Han and Han. There's different ways of saying certain names.
Yep.
What's correct and what's not, and who's the arbiter of what is correct and what isn't? What do you think? Do you think there's room for different ways of saying different names?
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, if you look at the original series, like you said, you've got Han and Han and Leia and Leia, and that's actually kind of canon because it's actually in the films. It's only really the last couple of years or so that I really made a concerted effort to call Boba Fett and not Bubba Fett. That's just one of those things. I mean, I suppose it's just like how different regions in the country and across the world kind of pronounce stuff. I mean, look at tomato and potato, and that's not even getting into how they kind of pronounce stuff down in the southwest, down in like Yeovil and all that, backwards areas. So, which is probably where from Lee's from, to be fair. So,
I so hope it is.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, even like Lucas, didn't he? He, I think it might have been at a celebration or something, or an interview, but he referred to the ice planet of Hoth as Hoth, and it's just like, and it was one of those, like, I don't think anybody's ever I've never heard anybody kind of like refer to Hoth as Hoth, and it's just like, it's one of those things. I mean, it's a big galaxy, so I suppose lots of people are going to pronounce stuff very differently.
Exactly. Sometimes you're told how words are supposed to be said, and it bugs me because certainly you mentioned Forlom earlier and Zuckuss in relation to the Hasbro stuff. And recently in Bounty Hunters, which is currently my favourite comic series at the moment, I love it, they've had Zuckuss, Don't think there's any other way you can say Zuckuss. Zuckuss, I don't know. And what we know and have always known, well, I say always known, Forlom to me was the beige character and Zuckuss was the metal robot, and they've swapped them around. So now Forlom is the robot and Zuckuss is the Gand, the beige character, if you want to call it that. They've both got a very similar head and face anyway. And now in Bounty Hunters, all of a sudden, it's not Forlom, it's 4LOM. And I read it and I did a double take. I think I even mentioned it in the review. It was like, what? Where did that come from? I've never heard that character called 4LOM before. And it made me think of various other things, like in the UK, we call Darth Vader's Star Destroyer the Executor.
Yeah.
In America, and I've been told by a variety of people, it's not Executor, it's Executor. It's the Executor, which to me, an Executor hands out a will. Because Imperial Star Destroyers are supposed to have the Barbarian, the Devastator, the big hard-hitting names. And then the biggest ship at the time is called the Executor. Oh, we're going to come to your planet and hand you a notice to tell you we're going to destroy you if you don't do what we say. Wow, that carries a lot of heft, doesn't it? But the Executor, it's like, I ain't messing around with a ship called the Executor.
Exactly.
Just the name alone would get me out the system. AT-AT, it's alliterative. So you say AT-AT, AT-AT, it's an AT-AT. And yet you hear some people say, no, it's an AT-AT. You don't say AT-ST, do you? And they go, no, because that's stupid. Why would you say that? You say AT-AT because it AT-AT.
I think I've always called it AT-AT, but then I've always kind of deferred to AT-ST.
Yep, same.
So
it rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
AT-ST, and AT-AT. But I suppose maybe we could kind of like meet in the middle and call it an AT-AT or an AT-AT or something and just kind of like mix it up a little bit. I don't know.
Or a walker. Just call it a walker.
An Imperial Walker, which is kind of like a lot easier. Yeah. I mean, it's like we refer to a snowspeeder as a snowspeeder, not an Incom T-47, or even an X-Wing as an Incom T-65. So
yeah. But I think with a lot of these things are going back to the original trilogy with General Dodonna saying Princess Leia. Everybody else is calling her Leia. A lot of characters, like say Han and Han and Boba and Boba. Who's going to argue with Harrison Ford when he's filming the scenes in the desert and he goes, Boba Fett where? And Richard Marquand suddenly goes, who the heck's Boba Fett? It's Boba Fett.
Boba where? Yeah.
Exactly. You're in a pinch, you just say it, don't you? You're trying to get your point across. A lot of the names now, Finn. You can't say Finn any other way. Rey, you can't say Rey any other way. Poe, you can't say Poe any other way. Kylo, how do you say Kylo any other way? So certain names now it's very obvious how it's said, isn't it?
There's always that thing, at least with the expanded universe, it seemed like a lot of female characters ended in a A. So you had Leia, and you had Mara, and you had Callista, and you had Bria. It always seemed like that, and that's kind of like Spanish grammar, because in Spanish grammar you have masculine and feminine words, and the feminine words tend to end in an A. So like it helps distinguish what they are in terms of characters. But I mean, that's me stretching. I mean, what's interesting actually is one character in the High Republic, the main bad guy who runs a Nile, Marchion Ro, which is how they pronounced it in the audiobooks, and it's how they pronounced it in, I think, the YouTube video as well, a little kind of 2-minute, like, this is Marchion Ro, isn't he great and scary, rare. But then Kevin Scott and I think Justina Ireland were on a Zoom call, and they called him Marchion Ro. Now, which one is it? We've got the guy who authored the book is saying Marchion Ro, and then Star Wars and the actual official, I suppose you'd say, pronunciation, and probably the way that I think everybody who would see it, because it's a CH spelling, would probably say it's Marchion Ro.
Or Marchion.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I suppose until like you get a definitive, this is how it's going to be said, one way or another, the scope for different ways. And I mean, everybody knows who Boba Fett is, and everyone knows who Boba Fett is. I don't think I've ever heard anybody stop and kind of pick anybody up on it. More
important than how you say it, because, like you say, regional accents and just how you perceive the word is, unless Lando came up to you and went, stop calling me Lando, it's Lando or whatever, or Han says, I'm not Han Solo, I'm Han Solo. If the person actually comes to you and corrects you, then that's fair enough. I think the spelling is the thing. Classic in Star Wars is lightsaber, isn't it? I used to run a site called Lightsaber, BRE. I used to get stick from Americans all the time saying it's BER, but then you look at early comics, it was spelt BRE, and then Lucasfilm went, no, we've decided the spelling of lightsaber is BER, and that's how it's been ever since, and that's fine, So I think in terms of saying a word, Qui-Gon Jinn refers to Coruscant, whereas everybody else says Coruscant, Chorus, not Curus, so there's little things like that, and I think I could be wrong, but I'm sure Lucas used to refer to it as Coruscant. as in Kurosawa sort of thing. You know what I mean? It was that sort of the way you said it. I don't think there's a specific way of saying certain names, but like you say, if Chewbacca came up to you and told you in no uncertain terms, it's Chewbacca, not Chewbacca. You know what I mean? Or
yeah,
you know what I mean? Then you're being corrected by the right person, because then you're kind of insulting them by not saying the name properly. You know, we've got the Heir to the Empire Luke coming out. And there's a clone Luke in there. And on the page, it's Luke with 2 U's. I don't think you would actually say Luke. I think that was a visual cue to determine which of the Lukes we were talking about at the time. Yeah. You know? You don't say Luke any different.
When I went back and re-listened to the unabridged version of Heir to the Empire, not so long ago, because we had that chat with the guys from Generation Skywalker.
That's right.
So I listened to that, and Mark Thompson, he kind of puts a bit of a pause in it. So it's like a Luke. You've got to be able to distinguish between the two in the prose, one way or another. If we see them on screen, it's different, because we'll clearly know which one's the Luke Skywalker and which one's the clone, because he'll be dressed slightly differently, and they'll make him have, I don't know, a bit more stubble or something like that. And, you know, like we did with Superman, it was in Superman 3 when they had that Superman fight and stuff. So I suppose it's just kind of like a slight limitation on the medium to some degree.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, a Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
Let's change tact a little bit, because earlier this week, Warner Brothers have finally released the long-awaited Snyder Cut, Justice League. And it kind of got me thinking just about, in the last 5 or 6 years, since Disney took over, and with, you know, the change of directors and the turmoil with some of the films in production, do you reckon there's any Star Wars films that would probably lend themselves or could possibly make a good candidate for a kind of Snyder director's cut kind of release?
Well, first off, I saw the original Justice League, the 2017 Justice League, and it was a hot mess. So to take another 70 million and go back to that and try and salvage something else out of it, given that the original probably cost best part of 200, so that combined now this movie is one of the most expensive films ever made, you've got to be pushing sort of high 200s now in terms of how much they've spent on it.
Yeah.
It really is trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, so I don't know how they can hope to do it, and I haven't watched it yet, so I can't really judge the Snyder version too much, because I've not watched it. Hopefully by next week I will have. But to your question, not so much in the way that they've done it on HBO Max and Sky Movies here in the UK, of re-releasing it as a freshly packaged thing, because Star Wars and its continuity, which is so important, not canon, because everything's canon, but continuity. I think you could unbalance things in a way that you wouldn't with something like DC or even Marvel, because of all the spin-off material that Star Wars generates that other franchises don't.
Yeah.
You know, as an original trilogy fan, that every blink, every head turn, every character down a side street in Mos Eisley has a story. And the further down the Star Wars timeline we go, less characters get a story. But nevertheless, there's still things that happen that have effect on other things. It's a massive, it's a massive thing that sort of intertwines with each other in Star Wars to a level that it just doesn't anywhere else. That being said, if they did a verticommas Snyder cut of, let's say, Rise of Skywalker, which, I think they said inverted commas, it's been said or it's been put out there.
Yeah.
They could have put a 5-hour cut of Rise of Skywalker together because there was so much material that they had to trim down. And that's not to say there is a 5-hour cut. I'm saying that if they'd have compiled all the material that they shot and put it into some sort of chronological order as an assembly edit, if you like, it would have been 5 hours long. I'm sure that's the case for every film. You trim down until you get to what you're looking for. So there's stuff out there for Rise of Skywalker, I'm picking that as the first example, that wouldn't contradict other stuff, would only embellish what we saw and go deeper into things that were visually interesting or action sequences or whatever it might be. But I think once you get to a final edit, the director, the editor, and everybody around them, and specifically the composer who goes and writes his score off the back of what he's given, the visual effects artists who go and do their mojo on the material that they're given, it's locked to a degree in terms of story and what it is, and then everybody else goes and adds their flourish to it. So to come back and sort of start again, which is kind of what the Snyder Cut is, he had his original shots, and then Joss Whedon came in and reshot, and Warner Brothers apparently wanted him to change this up, change that up. Kind of reminds me of Rogue One a bit. We want Star Wars version of Private Ryan. So he delivers the Star Wars version of Private Ryan, and they go, whoa, this is too much like Private Ryan. What was the guy supposed to do? It sounds like, from what we know, he did exactly what they wanted. Dantooine got mentioned, and it turns out that they planned a sequence in Rogue One that was the evacuation of Dantooine, because if you remember, Leia mentions that, she basically offers up Dantooine as a replacement for the destruction of Alderaan, and Tarkin says that's too remote. And then they blow up Alderaan, and then they send their probes and their people out to Dantooine. They go, well, there was a rebel base, but it's been evacuated.
Our scout ships have reached Dantooine. They found the remains of a rebel base, but they estimate that it has been deserted for some time. They are now conducting an extensive search of the surrounding systems.
She lied. She lied to us.
It turns out that Dantooine was the first rebel base. They left it, they set up on the Yavin. And Rogue One, being so close in proximity to A New Hope, would have shown you the evacuation of Dantooine. And it said in my research that sort of budgetary concerns and I guess various other factors meant that they never progressed with that idea. So to see something like that, which historically is very key to what we saw 40 odd years ago in A New Hope, would be fascinating. So I think, is it a Snyder cut? Is it something that you would consider completely continuity? We've just added Ewoks, Caravan of Courage, all the other stuff to Disney Plus. We know that's not canon, inverted commas, but it's Star Wars and it's interesting to us, so there's a value in it. What do you think?
The Snyder Cut in particular is a very unique case. Now, basically what happened was he stepped away from the project because he had a bereavement in his family, and so they recruited Joss Whedon to take over. And obviously Joss Whedon had done Avengers and that, and has a different style to Zack Snyder. So there's an argument to say that basically they had to get somebody to fill the role who had a similar kind of resume. But I think the mistake was that they got Joss Whedon to do it because, like you said, tonally the films didn't match at all, and it's a mismatch. Now, when we start to talk about director's cuts, most of the director's cuts tend to be longer, because the reason why is normally the studios have come in and said, we need you to snip out 10 minutes or 20 minutes of a film. And it's normally the studios who've kind of interfered. And so actually what we see in the original theatrical release of a film isn't the true director's vision, shall we say. That's why, for instance, there's been so many different versions of like the Blade Runner. There's like 7 or 8 different iterations. And ironically, I think even Ridley Scott kind of said that the director's cut actually doesn't work quite as well as I think the theatrical cut because it's slower. But, it's given the fans a chance to see, his vision of that film and what he actually attended before, the studios came in and said, no, we need you to lose extra minutes, because the longer the film, it puts people off sometimes, and also then you can't get so many shows per day. So it's a box office money thing.
So do you think if they did that then, do you think they should make it a sort of an in-continuity edit, or do you think it should just be its own thing? Like Snyder's Justice League seems to be its own thing because the fans wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think from what I'd read, there's, the Snyder Cut, the fans really got behind it, and they were, they'd kind of hired billboards in Times Square, and they've done all this stuff and really pressured the studio. Enough for the studio to actually go, actually, there's probably enough of a market to warrant this. Now, the question would be if, let's say, for instance, we get a Lord and Miller solo cut, because they shot about 80%, or at least Ron Howard reshot 80% of it. So that's pretty much almost the entire film that had been in the can. So how different would that have been? And is that just a tone thing, or is that actual story beats that we're now missing? Similarly, I think out of all of them, I would really like to see the Gareth Edwards version of Rogue One, because I think that is the one that, the studio kind of really interfered in the DNA of the film. The reason why I say interfered with the DNA of the film, because it was, like you said, he'd set out to make a certain film. And again, the JJ cut, or the mythical JJ cut, which I think a lot of people started hashtag and release that fairly soon after The Rise of Skywalker. Friends who worked on the film said that they shot a lot of stuff, but they shot more than they needed. The films that tend to shoot more than they need is because they don't actually know what they need. Whereas other films, you can actually have a really tight shooting ratio. Last Jedi, for instance, that came in under budget. And one reason why it came under budget is because Rian Johnson knew what he wanted to shoot and shot what he needed, rather than, doing the George Lucas thing of kind of producing it in the edit suite, which is there's 2 different ways of approaching film creation and narrative construction at the end of the day. So I'd love to see deleted scenes and things like that. And the thing is, nowadays, if you put it on a Blu-ray, it's not hard to rip a Blu-ray and actually take that deleted scene and insert it into your final cut. And obviously it becomes an unofficial fan release, but then it gives people an idea is actually not only why maybe that scene was deleted, but actually what would happen if that scene was actually included. Does it actually bring out any extra parts to the story? Sometimes you kind of, things are left on the cutting room floor for a very good reason. But, I don't think we're likely to see another special edition where the special edition director's cut of the original trilogy supersedes and is now the canonized version of that film, to the point whereby we can't even really get a decent theatrical version of Star Wars, released without a special edition editions on it.
The difference here is that Snyder was given that money to go back, and also the DCU. I mean, blimey, you had the Nolan trilogy, then you had Green Lantern, which was supposed to be part of this new DCU, but it was awful, so they kind of ignore it. Man of Steel really kicked it off and everything forward, but DC's never remotely found its feet in the way that obviously Marvel has to huge success, so that it's an unfair comparison, really. But do you think that they would ever be the scenario? I don't think they would. I think it's a dead question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you think there'd ever be the scenario where, for example, you have a Star Wars film and it's known that there was changes made to it, which we had with Solo, we had with Rogue One specifically, and not a wink of a complaint about either. I think they're both fantastic. So I wouldn't change them anyway. I'm curious, but I wouldn't change them. Do you think Lucasfilm or Disney would ever go to a director? Go on then, Gareth. Here's 70 million. Go and do what you were going to do, and we'll release it as the Edwards cut of Rogue One. Do you think that will ever happen? I don't.
I don't think so, because as much as I love Rogue One, I don't think it's as important as film. The whole point of Justice League was this was really meant to be the foundation for a whole franchise.
It's their Avengers, yeah.
It is totally their Avengers. Whereas, okay, possibly if JJ had royally screwed up Force Awakens, then maybe, but it would depend on the circumstances. Because I think that's the thing. Because, like I said, it will come down to the circumstances. Obviously, Rogue One made 1.1 billion. That's a heck of a dough. So, as far as I'm sure everybody at Disney's concerned, it is a successful film. And from what we understand, at least from the optics we kind of saw, Gareth kind of went along and supported, the final post-production and the revisions and stuff, and stuck with it to his credit, I think. So, therefore, maybe there's probably less need for that. All those trailers that came out for Rogue One that we didn't really see, any of that footage that we didn't see of them running down the beach and stuff, it would be great to see an alternate ending. And I think possibly they could do an alternate ending or like a double Blu-ray. And as long as I think there's a clear notification that there is still only one official Rogue One and this doesn't supersede it and stuff like that, then it's fine. I'm guessing with a Snyder Cut, does this now supersede what was released in the theatre? I mean, I don't know how it changes. They're at the early days of that franchise, really, whereby they can probably still retcon and change a lot of stuff and it could probably work. Whereas, we're 40 years into a franchise of films that if you start to change too much, it's just I think the wheels could fall off a wagon pretty quickly. Righty, so thanks to Lee for that question. Good to have a chat, Mark. That's all the chatting we're going to have a chance to do. But if you are like Lee and you do have a question, you're more than welcome to send it in. We love questions. Fill our sacks so we can just empty them all over the place again. But if you want to get in touch, listen to my good friend Mark and he will tell you how you can do it.
If you want to be part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news, visit fanthatracks.com or check out the free Panther Tracks app through the App Store to follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in those listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. So send them in like Lee did this week. Send your questions in. As you can tell, we'll talk about anything. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds @Panther and be sure to subscribe, leave a review on Amazon Music, Audible, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify or your podcatcher or smart speaker of choice. And as always, thanks to James Semple for composing our Panther Tracks intro, Adam O'Brien for the Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. Another episode in the can, only 18 to go till we reach 100 studio episodes. I think we'll be there by the summer the way we're going.
I think so, and especially if we start doing like discussions and roundtables on every single episode of the Ewoks and the Clone Wars, can easily reach out, I reckon. It'd be great fun.
Fancy that. Yeah, I quite fancy that. Sounds like a plan.
Sounds like a plan. Until next week, my friend, take care, and everybody else, stay safe. May the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.